Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight for my town hall on the budget just released, 2021 budget. I'm really pleased to have James Cumming with me this evening. And we're here, he's just going to give you a brief overview of a few things, and then we want to hear from you and answer your questions as well tonight. So first of all, James.
Great. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, James.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm new at this. So guys, you know, you have to be patient with me. I see a lot of good people on the call here, so they get me. I want to just take a moment to introduce you because it's always nice for folks to have an idea of who it is that's presenting to them. And I appreciate you so much. So I'm just going to read a bit of a bio here, and then we can pass it on to you if that's all right. Okay, so James was elected in the 2019 federal election as the Member of Parliament for Edmonton Centre. In December of that year, he was appointed as the official opposition's Shadow Minister for Small Business and Export Promotion. And in September 2020, he was appointed to Shadow Minister for Innovation, Science and Industry. In February of this year, James has taken on a new role as the Shadow Minister for COVID-19 Economic Recovery. So James graduated from North Alberta Institute of Technology, NAIT, and went on to have a successful career in business, construction, and real estate. He was most recently the CEO of the HGA Group of Companies. Now his children are adults, and James is committed in his public life to ensure that future generations have the same opportunities that he enjoyed. James values integrity, hard work, fiscal responsibility, and most importantly, family. James is a staunch supporter of the City of Edmonton and the province of Alberta through participation on various volunteer boards. So growing up, James learned the value of hard work and responsibility and has applied those values throughout his career and instilled them in his son and two daughters. James and his wife, Debbie, reside just a few blocks from his childhood home in Edmonton. So thank you so much, James, for being here this evening. I know folks are looking forward to spending some time with us and talking through some of the main things regarding this budget. So I give the floor to you.
Great. Thanks, Cathay. And thank you for all you do for your constituents. Cathy's an incredibly hardworking MP, and I can assure you that she has your best interests at heart. So she works hard every day. And thanks for that kind of introduction. I'm pretty new to politics. I try to look at things through a lens, not through a political lens, but what are the good things that we need to do? I ran for office because I am legitimately concerned and was concerned when I first ran about what potential bad policies can do for the lives of the citizens, particularly for us in Western Canada. And if I was concerned 5 years ago when I ran and lost, I am concerned in spades now because a lot of the policies pre-COVID or post-COVID, regardless, we had anemic growth before COVID, and now I'm incredibly concerned about the size of the debt and the deficit, and some of the spending and direction of the spending. So I'll start with the budget. Here it is. This document, 700 pages worth. I've gotten through most of it. And I would tell you that in 700 pages, it's the largest budget that we've seen in recent history. The sell on it from the government is that it's Build Back Better. My quick review of it, and we're digging into the further details, I would call it is Build Back Bigger, because there is enormous government spending. Now, that's not to say that a conservative government wouldn't have spent money to try and support people through a health pandemic. I would suggest that we probably would have, but there is a point in time where you have to start to look at how are you going to ratchet it back, which there are some details within the budget on how they're going to do that. But more importantly, if you're going to continue to spend, at least make sure it's not structural spending, and make sure that it's targeted towards things that will create revenue and create opportunities for people in the future. And sadly, I don't think there's a lot in this. There's a lot of talk about retraining people for new jobs. And I'm just a huge proponent of Canada has these enormous strengths that we had going into COVID. We still have them, and we still should try to utilize those strengths. Sadly, for the folks in Saskatchewan and the folks in Alberta, there was little mention of anything to do with energy. And really, the natural resource sector is what gave us a lot of the great things that we have in this country, and will continue to provide a lot of those great things. Albeit there may be a move to different energy sources, but at least in the foreseeable future, Canada and the world needs a lot of our energy. Just a couple quick things, 2020, 2021. I know these are mind-numbing numbers because we were on the government pre-COVID that they went from saying they'd have $10 billion deficits and they climbed to 50, while wazoo 2020-21, it was 354.2 billion, and 21-22 is predicted to be 154 billion. And then it starts to slide down, but it's still 59, 51, 35, and 30 up to 2025. And I would suggest to you that these numbers are on the basis of the interest rates staying low and there being modest inflation. And from what I've heard from a lot of my constituents and from businesses, that's going to be anything but the case. So a couple other key things, expenditures for 21-22, 500 billion. And if you put that in context, we've never seen anything like this. Their $100 billion stimulus fund, which we're not quite sure where the direction of that will go. There are extensions of a lot of the programs that businesses have been taking advantage of and individuals have, including extension of the Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy till September 25th. There's a daycare program that I'm sure people have questions on. And there's just, I could go on and on. It is a sprinkle of money everywhere. Some of it, is probably legitimate. I'm sure that we would have done some of it. But the reality for me and my background from business would tell me that you need to be strategic in your thinking. You need to focus. That's the success of most people in life and most people in business. And this is really sprinkling money all over the place. So it's definitely a pre-election budget.
It's called an election stimulus, right?
Yeah, and I'm disappointed. I think, I got into politics because I wanted to see policy to do the right thing for people. I understand that you have to win an election and that there's electioneering within budgets and within public policy. But to me, this is just going to burden my kids. And now I have 2 grandkids, so my kids' kids. And I just think it's incredibly unfortunate. But we're really here to hear from you and hear your questions. And I'm really excited to hear that. I'll leave it at this, Cathy, that my work now with COVID economic recovery, I'm very interested in what people have to say and where they think we should focus our efforts on. I'm on my 3rd portfolio, so my kids tell me I don't know how to keep a job, but I do think it's for all the right reasons. I'm very keenly interested in making sure that coming out of this crisis that we get it right. So I'll leave it at that. And thanks again for having me today.
Yeah, great. Thanks, James. Yeah, the fact of those 3 portfolios, I think, speaks very highly. So yeah, there's no question the COVID, portion of it is still a necessity because of the circumstances that we're in. We won't go into the fact that we feel we're in those circumstances to a large degree because of lack of decisions or poor timing on the government's part to respond to COVID. But I'm going to move right into questions because I think we have a fair number and we only have a limited time. So the first one is from Samantha. Trudeau would have us think he cares about seniors. Okay, we know where this is going, but then sneakily scales back the age deduction for anyone over 65 earning 38,500 plus. Could he live on 38,500? In cities where rent is over a third of this, it's not much to live on. In fact, the MPs gave themselves a raise in these times dire for most people with what? The money being clawed away from those who are 65 and older. So, yeah, we have this issue we have to respond to. The fact that there is a raise for members of parliament. It's called well, it's in the legislation, and the only way that you cannot get that raise is if this prime minister did what he can do and basically shut that raise down, which he's chosen not to do. So as far as it coming forward, we don't have a lot of choice on that, unfortunately. So it's what we do with it, I guess, at this point, right, James?
Yeah, so a couple of things come to mind is I can assure the people on the call that I didn't run for the money. I didn't even know what the salary was when I started. So, that's not what drives me. That's not what gets me out of bed in the morning. I'm really trying to do this to advocate for good policy. So it's up to the prime minister to change this and freeze it or roll it back or do whatever they want. And I'll be accepting of any of that. It's my personal choice to give whatever that raise is to charity. But in fairness, I don't expect everybody to do that. Everybody's walk in life is different. So they may have situations that are different than mine that requires that they need that income. I don't know. But more importantly, on the seniors, and I think it's very, very important issue. And it's difficult for seniors to live. And whenever we get it, and Cathay, I think you heard me in the House on this issue because I was asked a specific question on it. I acknowledge that it would be good to be able to give more to seniors from an income standpoint, but no one ever talks about what about the cost going up? Like, what about all the layering on of additional expenses for seniors? Whether it be the carbon tax, whether it be which goes on everything. It goes on food. It goes on everything that they acquire. So the cost of living is getting higher. Taxes are always getting higher. Hidden taxes are always getting higher. So I think it's a combination of things. I think we need public policy that lowers costs. And yes, for those people that need a hand up, for sure, we should have public policy that makes sure that, particularly with seniors who have given us everything that they have, that we should try and protect them as they go into those later years. And I'm getting close to being a senior, so I guess from a public policy standpoint, I'm getting closer to understanding what that need is.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true that I'm not sure why you went with the age 75 either, to start moving forward. We have many seniors that there's no question the cost of living is more than what they bring in from their fixed incomes. My mom's in that circumstance, so I certainly understand it. So Bert says, why is the age group 65 to 75 excluded from receiving bumps in the OAS? If I am correct, the provisions are only for ages 75 and older. So
I have no idea.
Yes, that is the case. Yeah, that is the case, but the reasoning, we don't understand a lot of their reasoning behind a lot of what we're facing in this budget and on many levels, quite honestly, as far as what the rationale is for the Liberals to make that decision. So, okay, Michael Roby's question: how will the CBC use reason and facts to demand our federal government minimize or eliminate regulations and provide tax relief to secure measurable economic and budget benefits to Canadians in a post-COVID recovery? Good question.
So Michael, if you don't mind, Cathay, I want to deal with this. Michael sent this question in advance. And I don't have a specific answer to you, Michael, other than I think budget should be on the basis of outcomes and measurable outcomes. And there is virtually nothing in this budget that measures outcomes and tries to get to a goal. I want to thank you because what you sent in is so pertinent to the work I'm doing right now on COVID economic recovery. I was excited when I read through this. It's very well done. I'm going to take a lot of these suggestions, these policy suggestions, and take it back to my team, and I'll be feeding it into the leader's office, because it's a combination of predominantly what they did in the States to try and create an economic environment where people are starting to get ahead again. So in my mind, this is a country, we should be ashamed of when people try to aspire to do more and get ahead. In fact, we should be encouraging it. So, I thank you for what you gave to me, and it's very distinct, and it's very much follows my line of thinking is don't start burdening people, start releasing them, let them grow and prosper. And thank you for submitting in advance.
Well, that's great. Very good to hear. So we'll wait and see what outcomes we achieve with that. It's great. Okay, Ryan asks how the CBC will help farmers now that Erin O'Toole has announced a carbon tax. How is the private members bill progressing to remove carbon taxes off of propane and natural gas for grain drying? Okay, so yes, this is the conversation that I haven't begun to have in my writing that I know I need to have in regards to our environmental plan as it came out just before the budget. So the question around the carbon tax, there are significant differences to what Erin has put forward versus what our Prime Minister currently is doing. I understand the frustration, believe me, with the fact that there is still a carbon pricing mechanism there. However, I am relieved that the money is not going to the federal government. It's going into an account for each of us that spend that money, and we have the opportunity to then invest it back into whatever we choose based on a gamut of options that will be there to see your own carbon footprint and then to also invest in your own circumstances. I know many of the farmers are excited about this because they want to invest in things that they need to run their business. I had one individual mention to me, well, when you look at, you go out and buy a case of beer or a case of pop, do you pay a tax on that? Well, no, it's not a tax, it's a levy. But the reality is, well, why is it a levy and not a tax? Because you can get that money back. If you choose to take your bottles in, you get that restored to you personally. The difference here is this is specific to the environment. And you guys, I know Saskatchewan, same with you, James, right? I mean, if you want to look at environmentally sound thinking people, our whole structure of government, everything, the way that we farm our land, our resource industry, like James says, it's the best in the world. And we keep pounding on this in the House. This government has no desire to include that sector in any way in achieving Canada's economy being restored. And it's our best resource industry to make that difference. So I understand the frustration around the dynamics of this. And believe me, the last thing that I want to do is see Saskatchewan in a circumstance where, once again, we're not appreciated for what we already do. And the good thing with this as well is, and this is something I really pushed for when Erin met with our Saskatchewan caucus, we want to see what goes forward regional, based on every province determining what they feel they need to do. Because when you do this across Canada approach, it doesn't work. And so I'm excited that this is a suggestion, but it will be up to the provinces, and we're going to work hard alongside our premier. And we ended up with, I'm so proud of what he did in challenging the carbon tax right up to the Supreme Court, but the results were the results. And so, he's in a circumstance where if Trudeau forms government again, it is the carbon tax, or we come up with something different as a province. And I know that they're working hard on that at this point in time. James, do you have anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I'll just add that, so the intent of the policy is, I think Cathay described it correctly. And my hope is, in my province here, that the Premier, working with his his caucus and his cabinet will come up with a strategy around how, what is the equivalency, or what is something that they can do that will end up with the same result, which is the policy as it was put out said, listen, if provinces can come up with something, we're all ears. If I compare the two, this levy versus Trudeau's carbon tax, in my mind, so what's going on right now? There's a carbon tax, it goes into government coffers. They claim they give 90% back, but they give 90% back to a very narrow bandwidth. So it's really a wealth sharing strategy. It's not an environmental strategy. So at the least, with this strategy, with this levy, at least it goes into an account which everybody can utilize, and qualifying small businesses could utilize. So if they're running up a bunch of fuel bills, I talked to one of the guys that I deal with quite frequently, and he said he would use it towards modifying his fleet. So at least it's going back to the people that paid the bill. And so I think that's a vast improvement over the design of the Liberal one. And the Liberal one, the people on the call here, I don't think it's changed any behaviors. It's just been a tax grab, and it's been a form of wealth sharing. So I know people don't love it. Some people do. Some people like the structure of it. But at the end of the day, in my mind, it's a vast improvement over what was proposed by Trudeau, and still has the caveat that provinces can, figure out what their plan would look like.
Right. I should mention too, I had forgotten, we've had a number of good private members' bills come forward on the ag file, and Philip Lawrence's bill C-206, which deals with the issues of the carbon tax on grain drying and whatnot, has passed second reading, and it's been referred to the Ag Committee. So that is significant, and I do believe that, it's our bill, and it's certainly something that we would move forward with if we have that opportunity to form government.
Yeah, Cathay, and it's a bigger discussion because it's this continual increasing input costs into whether it's farmers. Talk to the mining sector where, this clean fuel tax, they go, when I build a mine, we have no choice. We're on diesel gensets. Like there's no, you can't out of the air you're not going to run a mine on solar panels or on wind turbines. So they go, you're making our industry uncompetitive. And Canada's blessed with all these resources. So there's an example of another industry that I think, if there should be at least some form of exemption. Right.
Very good. Okay, Darcy. Okay, this is the last question I have here. So if you have a question you want to ask, please put it in the chat box. So Darcy said, I think everyone is happy to hear about the childcare. However, I would really like to hear the Liberal plan to fund this. Most programs are good ideas, but it's how the program is funded where the balance comes in. Okay, so I have some views on that, but I'm sure, go ahead, James. When we're talking about this, how many billion?
Yeah, so $30 billion, and then 50% has to be funded by the province. So the federal government is broke. There is no money. Like when I hear this, not to say that it shouldn't warrant some consideration, but governing is making choices. And so maybe this is a good choice, maybe it's not. But the reality that everybody should know on this call is it's borrowed money. So what we're effectively doing is we're borrowing the money, and then we're saying to every province, because every province, I don't know a province that's in surplus right now, that they're going to have to borrow. So you got the federal government saying, okay, we're going to tell you where you're going to borrow. So do I think childcare is a worthy thing for us to try and advocate for? Yeah, I think so. I think it would, give those opportunities for people to be able to participate in the workforce. But at the very least, it should be broad enough that there's choice, that you've got significant choice. And the last thing that I think I want to see is a government-run childcare system I just think it'll be expensive, it'll be bureaucratic, it'll be all the things that we see when government decides they need to do something. So my preference is, if we're going to do it, we should do it in a fashion that the individuals have that choice.
Right. So that kind of sums up to a certain degree to my perspectives on this. The Liberals are saying that this is their stimulus when they talk about this great stimulus, because children in a national daycare means women are available to work, which means that they will be employed, and that is going to be the stimulus that changes things in our economy. This particular program will take over 5 years to implement if they get the provinces on side. And over that time, they also have to train significantly larger numbers of early childhood education instructors. We're very low on those, and then put the brick and mortar together and get everything set up. This is not something that you can do overnight, and yet somehow this is also what they're saying is their source of stimulus for the economy coming out of COVID. So that in itself, I really question that. Plus, I hear from individuals, childcare is very important, but they want options. There's no questions. The gals that work for our company at home have a grandma in town. We have an amazing cooperative childcare system, and this would basically remove the individuals who are running these as small and medium-sized businesses even. So we're not giving those options, and also the $10 is something that's going to happen over time again, so it's not an immediate response to the issues. So I struggle with government thinking that it knows the best way to take care of children, quite honestly. And I do think, though, that it's very important that we do have a system in place to help those who need a really good quality daycare program that they can afford, our low income earners and single parents. Those are the people, again, that we should be providing that for. That to me is more of a government responsibility, but to take over the entire system nationally across our country, I do struggle with that, and not just on my own basis, but from what I hear from people specifically in our riding. We need these childcare spaces available. Also heard a lot that through this whole COVID thing and the change in the digital economy, a lot of parents are working at home in ways that they haven't before, and they're trading off depending on what's going on. So there's other options out there that don't require, I really think this is an incredibly expensive way to do what I think Canadians can do a far better job of. So that's my perspective. You guys can certainly share yours as well. Anyone wants to put anything in the chat that has a different perspective is totally good. Debbie says, I'm curious about your views on the proposed $15 minimum wage. Do you think this will not be a significant challenge for businesses?
Well, I'll get started. It's a federal minimum wage. I don't think it'll have a big impact. I think it's just posturing in the budget. For the most part, I think most of the companies and industries that work with federal government are paying that $15. So I just think it's some signaling. And I think the majority of provinces are pretty close to that number anyways on their own internal minimum wages. So we'll see. I'm more of a market-based view of the world, that the market can figure these things out. But again, I think this was just electioneering again in a budget, trying to send some signals out.
Yeah. So unfortunately, though, a lot of people tend to think, well, that applies to the what am I trying to say? The average business too, that if this is what the government does, it sets that standard for business. Saskatchewan, we are a little bit lower than that, but at the same time, the reality is when you raise minimum wage in the general public, it impacts all wages, because the expectation is that that same increase would happen for other employees that maybe have been there for a long time and earning more income based on their experience and whatnot, which is all fine, but then everything goes up again, right? So it's a question of that impact on small businesses, especially in the circumstances that we find our small businesses in right now, trying to simply get their head around, I'm open, no, I'm not. Wait a minute, I'm open, okay, no, we're closed again, right? So to put those kinds of challenges out there, I think, again, it's posturing, I'd agree. So Mike, is there any stimulus? Oh, go ahead.
Well, yeah, the one thing I'd add to it is that, and it just frustrates me to no end that I hear this often, that businesses can afford it. And so when I hear this, for any of you that run a business, you only have so much elasticity in your pricing. And so there's this belief, oh, well, they can afford it, they'll just take it out of their profits. Well, the hard reality for most businesses right now, they're on razor thin margins. So, trying to increase costs, well, what will happen is that you'll probably try and figure out, how do I get by with less labor? And so the drive will be, try to eliminate labor, or, go to more part-time labor, or, you'll be looking for any angle you can, because you have to survive. So, it's a bit of false belief that this can just be absorbed into your pricing structure, that most businesses just don't have that luxury.
Agreed. And right now that's certainly the case. So Mike asks, is there any stimulus for the small businesses that are suffering with these lockdowns right now?
Well, there's a bunch of programs, Mike, that they're not necessarily stimulus programs, but there's the CEBA loan program, there's wage subsidy programs, depending on, how far your revenues have gone down, and they've been extended. So I don't like to call it stimulus. I look at it more, it's programs. So when I think of stimulus for small business, stimulus to me would be more along the lines of, are they doing anything to try and lower input costs? So lowering your CPP cost or your UI costs, or lowering input costs like GST costs. So far, I haven't seen anything in the budget that would indicate to me that there's a stimulus there. There is some mention in the budget about digital environment, and trying to help businesses with their digital platforms, and providing some capital for that. So there are some things sprinkled into the budget that may help with some businesses with trying to, work on their platform. But for the most part, I would tell you there's not a lot there for small business.
Yeah, I hear often, of course, what they want to hear is that this COVID thing is over and they can just get back to work and get their employees back at this point in time. But yet there's nothing here that deals with that. They consider this stimulus. Basically, the comment was, well, anything that government spends is stimulus, right?
Yeah.
Which is totally not true.
Yeah. Well, and the other part of this, I think a lot of this budget is predicated on the idea of, how do we look after people and keep them home? And what I hear from most business people is the exact opposite of that. They do not want to be home. They want to open their businesses again. They want to be able to open them safely, but they want to get back to work. And, I'm 30 plus years in business, and I never looked for the government to help me with my business. To me, it was, too bureaucratic. It would be, to apply for a program. We wanted to focus our attention on our customers and our staff, and building our team and growing our business. And well, the last thing I wanted is the government to get in my way. And I just feel that there's this premise now that government can be the stimulus. And actually, the best stimulus they can usually provide for business is get the heck out of the way. Stop regulating me to death. Stop taxing me to death. and stop creating these taxes that go into my input costs. So, those are some of the things that I'm working on, and hopefully we'll be able to suggest into a platform that will help businesses.
Yeah. I had a contractor come into my office actually before COVID, and he said, Cathay, he applied for government contracts, and he said, this is what it took to do the same job in the past. And he had a stack of paper this high, and he said, this is what it is now. And he brought me, I'm not kidding you, he said, it's ridiculous. There's the upstreams, the downstreams, you name it all, and it's not cost effective for him to do that and that's something this government loves to do is create as much red tape as possible. So not good for business. Okay.
Yeah, and not to belabor it, but for small businesses and particularly for startup businesses, one of the things that really helps you is a purchase order, like being able to, sell your wares. So, I think government can have a role there, that they, should be acquiring and at least, taking a good look at businesses locally and what they can offer. But Cathy's right; it's just so bureaucratic, and I think the reason it's that way is governments in general at all levels are incredibly risk adverse, because they're afraid, I guess politicians like me and Cathy, if they take a chance on someone and they screw up, you're going to be all over them, because they're saying, well, why did you give it to that person when they, couldn't deliver the service? But I think there's a happy medium. It's gotten too far the other way, where, it's mostly the bigger players that provide the services, because of procurement so bureaucratic that you don't have the staff to fill out the tender.
Right. Okay. Awa Swallens, I hope I'm saying that right. But small businesses in a small town won't be able to survive unless they increase their product service prices. Okay, and is that in reference to raising minimum wage, or just with the minimum wage? Okay, right. You're on track there. I would say that would certainly apply for our small businesses in Esterhazy. Those you only have so much of a market, and you want that shopping available, but it does mean prices would have to definitely go up. Okay.
Yeah, I guess the only good news there is that it's a federal minimum wage. So I think it's going to be built into the contract. So, and I think Cathy makes a valid point that when you keep trying to raise the bar, that it may have a sprinkle effect into other sectors and into the private sector that isn't doing work with government. So, there's a risk of that. But you are entirely correct. Like that's what I was talking about, price elasticity. If you keep on driving the costs up, how much are you willing to pay for a cup of coffee or a burger? Like it gets to the point, no one will go out anymore, and that's not healthy. That's not good for the economy and for particularly small centers.
Right. So I'm just going to quote, actually, I was listening, of course, to Power and Politics after the budget was presented, and Kevin Page, who was the very first parliamentary budget officer, was commenting just in a general look at it. I'm just going to share what he said and see what you guys think. The economy is snapping back stronger than expected. And the government is saying, with these low interest rates and this amount of uncertainty that there is, they don't care. They are going to stimulate the economy anyways. So that to me just shows the level of irresponsibility when, yes, we have this circumstance with COVID, but we need to realize that the economy is coming back stronger than expected. And, to just take advantage of the fact that there are lower interest rates right now, we're already looking at billions of dollars in interest at the current level, let alone when interest rates start to go up. And I was alive and in business when Pierre Elliott Trudeau was doing what he was doing to the West. And you know what? We lost everything. Interest rates doubled to 22% just when we were buying out our partner. We were in the lumber business. The cost of a 2x4, well, even now the costs are becoming, you can't build a house. The cost is making it impossible for young couples. We built back then an energy efficient, foot thick walls, a house that these guys don't understand, that we do these kinds of things out west because we have cold weather and this type of thing. But this concept that we can just go and spend because interest rates are low, that is going to backfire. And the thing that I think I find so frustrating about it is it tends to backfire, and then we need to come in and do the cleanup. And as conservatives, I think, and I hope you hear, that responsible government is key to making sure that we are not becoming a burden to generation after generation, simply because you have the capability to spend when you don't necessarily need to do what they're doing at this point in time. I see it as quite irresponsible.
Yeah, Cathay, I'd share the same view that $100 billion in stimulus spending, and a lot of it doesn't have anything to do with revenue creation or improving productivity or competitiveness. It's about vanity projects that they've decided to build into their budget. You could make an argument, should we expand a port or overpasses to try and improve the flow of goods and services? Sure, at least you get an asset, and broadband would be a classic example of that. Yeah. So that in rural centers, so that now that we've all tried to figure out how to work on remote locations in Zoom, I actually think Canada's got a strategic advantage in that. If we can engage a lot more of the rural people into the workforce digitally, that'd be a fantastic thing. But what they fail to recognize in this budget, and I think I mentioned earlier, is I think there's a lot of indicators that are indicating that we're going to see an inflationary move. So several businesses I've talked to have said that their products coming in, container costs are up, the products within the containers are up. All you have to do is go to the lumber store and it's staggering what's happened to lumber. And those are just a few things to, linens, import of cotton, commodity prices are up. So if we start to see an inflationary rise in Canada, what happens is that interest rates will rise. There's no doubt in my mind. And it's a fallacy for people to think that there isn't the potential that interest rates can go up. And this whole budget is predicated on interest rates staying low. So Cathy's right. It's about $40 billion in debt servicing right now. And if interest rates start to creep, although they'll term out some of their lending, but they can't term it all out. You can't put $450 billion into the bond markets and think that you're going to get a preferred rate. There's just not the capacity. So I am definitely concerned that that's no reason to throw another $100 billion into the mix. It's just not responsible. It's not good for our kids and our kids' kids.
1.3 trillion.
4, and they've got a debt
1.
ceiling they've asked for of 1.8. Right. So when they ask for the debt ceiling of 1.8, it tells you where the thinking is. I don't think that they're thinking, as I mentioned earlier, the 30, 40, $50 billion deficits. They were running that pre-COVID. So what makes us think that we'll actually see? I just don't think there's a recognition that there's an issue. I think there's a belief that you can continue to run deficits.
Yeah. Well, and the truth of the matter is that we have a couple of city councillors I know for sure on the call tonight, and there's only so many tax dollars, right? Regardless. Yeah. So the impact, it does. It goes, our provinces are at a borrowing level they've never been at before. Well, except for maybe Ontario, and our communities as well. Like this is not good prudence. So, okay, I have another question here. Debbie, I believe that the Liberals are well aware that they are spending our money. As the earlier question stated, could they live on $38,000 a year? Or could they run a profitable business based on what this budget and their former budgets and decisions have been, especially in Saskatchewan and Alberta? Do we need thinkers in policy making that actually understand the impact of decisions made at a federal level? That's so sad. Yes. Yes. There is not an yeah. I knew from what people said when I got into this job, you are going to not believe the level of whatever it is across the floor. But it really is there. There is not an understanding, this of all those, all of our middle class and those working hard to join it. They have no clue, really don't, of how damaging this is for our children and future generations. And those that are simply trying to, we didn't want to lay our staff off. And we've done everything we can to try and weather this on our own. My husband runs our business, but let me tell you, it was frightening right off the go. What is this? What's going on here? And I have to drill back to the fact that this COVID crisis is a crisis because of Trudeau. Our borders were not shut at the beginning when they should have been. And giving our PPE to China and destroying more and not working with Canadian companies. We don't have vaccines because he chose to go solely to China to get our vaccines initially. And we gave them our knowledge, and then they did what they do. And then he's behind the 8 ball. And what country, what pharmaceutical company is going to want to make you a priority when you've taken that route? So there's all kinds of things that have really damaged our economy and the lives of Canadians. This isolation, I have a 5-year-old grandson who had not seen his friends for so long. And when they were finally able to get together, they spent the afternoon. When that little boy had to go home, he had such a meltdown because he thought he was never going to see his friend again. So we know the impacts of all of this are well, even beyond our economy, the mental health issues, there's just so much that it just gets me going, because I just see that so much of this did not need to happen the way that it has happened. And I know it's a serious illness. I have family members and friends that have suffered with it. But regardless, I don't know, is anyone else tired of 24/7 COVID news? Right, with no good news. Yeah, hi Mike. Right. So, well.
Yeah, I'll just add, Kathy, that it's incredibly frustrating for me that when we hear some of the language around, we've got your backs, we won't let you down. I always put this in perspective. It's your money. It's not the government's money. It doesn't belong to the government. They're trustees for it, maybe, but it's your money. It's your taxes. It's your dollars. And then what's worse, they're borrowing on your backs. So there's not this artificial, beautiful tree that's floating dollars into the coffers. It's hardworking Canadians. And that's where I get frustrated, because when government starts to say, we're doing this for you, or we're doing it because we're the ones that are fixing all the problems. Well, quite often governments are some of the problems. So it's your tax dollars, and I every day I think about how can we be more effective, more efficient, because you work hard and it comes out of your paycheck. So you should be able to see a good return for it.
Mm-hmm. Any other comments from you? I don't think I have any more questions. No. So the thing is too, I did a radio interview, and they said, well, what's good in the budget, right? What are the good things? And yeah, I have to say, I'm pleased to see $100 million would be paid back to my Saskatchewan farmers from what they've paid in pollution pricing on their drying and whatnot. But first of all, that never should have been the case. And all of these things are good things. You can't argue with whether they're good or not. Investing in, carbon capture utilization and sequestration so that, they do better. The truth of the matter is our agriculture, our natural resources, everyone is working hard to become as efficient, energy efficient as possible already. That is the state of the world, quite honestly. Even getting capital now can be tied to what are you doing environmentally. So there I have to say, as much as it frustrates me about the carbon tax and everything, being here in Ottawa and learning about the dynamics out there, not just within our own country, but internationally, the dynamics are challenging for business in that way. Also, the states, they are doing a huge, huge stimulus that will overflow into Canada. That's another thing that they're not choosing to take a look at how our relationship there, Canada would benefit from that. So I don't know. It's an interesting dynamic to see that, what we do have these challenges. I met with the chicken farmers today. International, well, just go and sell your chickens more internationally. We'll help you to develop better methods of selling overseas. Well, you know what? Brazil is the chicken king of the world, and there's no way that our industry could ever compete internationally. So domestically, that's where they have to be. So there's all kinds of dynamics like this that impact our entire nation that are very hard to handle, let alone have a government that is choosing to do things that are irresponsible in regards to the level of debt that we're facing and not getting our economy back up and running the way that I think both James and I and our party realize we should be doing and could be doing. Go back to work safely and get people out of their homes, out of their basements, get kids, having those relationships that they need, which is causing more challenges for people, right, at this point in time, and still be safe. I have a son who is, he has immune challenges, has to be very, very careful. But in a lot of ways, I think what this has done is help us realize, what, we got pretty slack in just doing the basics in life, like washing your hands and that type of thing. So yeah, sorry, I keep jumping back and forth on COVID, but it's such an integral part of why we're where we are right now. I really do believe that. There's many countries that have handled it differently, many states that have handled it different than other states, and you see different outcomes. So.
Yeah, and I guess if we learned anything from this, Cathay, is that I look at it this way, that what are the important things for Canadians? And it should be security of your food, and that was at risk during COVID. Security of your health, and this has demonstrated that that was at risk. And security of energy, because you can't, without energy, like you can't heat your home, you can't run a business. And I think all three were at tremendous risk. And it just demonstrates to me we need to get better. And I look at the abundance that we have of natural resources, abundance of land, water, talent, that not only should we have our own security, but there's no reason on earth that Canada should not be leading the way to provide products and commodities throughout the world. And, I met with one producer on proteins and said, there's no reason why Canada, with our abundance, shouldn't be one of the top producers of proteins in the world. And I believe that. But you have to have the will. You have to have the will to want to do that, and the will to create an environment and a competitiveness that allows us to do that. And that's where I think there is nothing in this budget that recognizes that. And that's my bigger disappointment, that
Right.
we've got to get busy. We need to get people working again.
Right. So we have one more question, James. Comes from Curtis. How can we get Trudeau out?
That's why I ran. Listen, it takes a team effort, and we can't do it without you. For those that believe in what we're trying to do, I think it takes volunteers, it takes some capital, and it's going to take a big vision. And I'm convinced that you may not have seen enough out of us yet from a platform standpoint and from policies, but I do think there's a willingness to make sure that we get this right. And I think Canadians need to be inspired with a different vision, and I think you're going to get that from us. But to get them out, it takes everybody getting out to vote that doesn't want them back, and in across the country. So it's important that not only Western Canada want them out, but we have to start getting the rest of Canada realize this is not long-term healthy and sustainable for this country. Yeah. And hopefully we'll be able to give a vision that will resonate.
Yeah. And I have to say, you guys, you know what? To me, right at this moment in our history, it's absolutely crucial that we remove Trudeau from power. And if we don't do that, it's not good. It's not good. And I want you to know that I am absolutely thrilled. We have a whole cohort of new members of parliament that came in 2019. Unbelievable, amazing members of parliament. And they have never had a normal day serving in the House of Commons. Never. And we are working so hard, not only we must retain our seats and gain seats. We cannot afford to lose any seats. And so I am saying that, to the fact that we have challenges on the prairies in regards to it's time to separate. And I can tell you that would be the most devastating thing we could do. One thing that I have loved experiencing is that there are conservatives across this nation. Okay, we showed in the last election, we didn't win, but we had the largest opposition in Canada's history, and we represented across this entire nation. And we are committed in Saskatchewan to working with our ridings on the East Coast. I have a son-in-law from Prince Edward Island, and I sometimes say out east when I'm talking about Ontario, and he chides me because, excuse me, that is not east, that's central Canada. But we need to work together, and I'm realizing, I can tell you in Ontario, there are farmers in Ontario that feel exactly the same way that we do. There are people on the coast who farm fish. We have so much in common across this nation that a lot of times we don't realize and don't celebrate. And I know our challenge is the big cities. But that being said, we need to reach out, and we came very close in one of the by-elections in Toronto. We scared the life out of the Liberals. And we're committed to doing everything we can to put Erin O'Toole in as the Prime Minister of Canada. Do I agree with everything in my party? I don't agree with everything in any party, in any dynamic. I can't get my family to all agree around a table. So there are situations where, yes, I would do things differently, but you have to come together. And we are a party of different perspectives. And I talk about it similar to the way I talk about my relationship with my husband. I'm over here, he's over here. We're discussing something. We are not together. We end up working and we end up here, and then we're over here. Like, it's important to be able to have real discussions and disagree and still work together. And that's our goal. Like, we want to be there for Canada. And this nation has too much of value for me to be in a place where I'm ready to say in any way, we're not here for our entire nation. So that's our goal, and we're working hard. It's tough being in a House of Commons where we don't get to be together the way you normally are, I look forward to the day when those that haven't had that experience the way we should have it. And I'll just mention one other thing. We are very concerned about the economy, but you can be very proud of the way this party, and a lot of them were our new members as well, fought in that House in regards to C7, that made legislation that abuses those with disabilities and now those with mental illness and things like that. We are a compassionate party that is very concerned about the mental health and the wellness of people. And that is something that concerns me, is this divisiveness that seems to be percolating on the other side, where it's pitting different people against different people who, what you hear is not the truth about Canadians. So, all right, Margaret, how am I doing? Am I over time? Am I going to get in trouble? Has to be the last question. Okay, sorry. Okay, Margaret, the Conservative Party's Secure the Environment plan to fight climate change and protect the environment includes introducing low carbon savings accounts by enabling Canadians to save money every time they fuel up. These savings could go towards buying your first electric car or making your home greener. Because 18% of global emissions result from livestock, which is more than all forms of transportation combined, would you consider letting people save money towards the low carbon savings account, every time they purchase plant-based proteins and foods rather than animal products, by placing a carbon tax on animal products, especially beef? All right, I have a view on this. Do you, James? Where are you at?
I can't say that I get out of bed every morning thinking about that specific issue, but I think the premise of it, partly with the platform and the plan that was put forward, was to encourage people to buy local and buy sustainable as a choice. If that's your choice, that you're able to do that. So I think that was part of the plan. My caution with it, because I think the premise is that it might, we don't want to stop our ability to grow in certain sectors. So if we have the ability in Canada to produce livestock and beef and other exportable products, I think we should still look at that as that's an opportunity for us. And I think we can do it in a fashion that is better than anybody else. I honestly believe that. I think our farmers are as prudent as they come. So I don't want to detract from their ability to be able to grow and prosper and export, because I think other countries aren't doing it in the same fashion. Their methodologies, their tilling, like a lot of things that we do here aren't done in other jurisdictions. Yeah. So why wouldn't we try to displace the bad players with the way we do it here? So but the general premise, I think, you should be able to have choice if that's what you want to choose.
Yeah, and choice is great. I'm going to post on, if it's available now, I had an opportunity to see an amazing environmental documentary on pasture lands and the importance of pasture lands to the ecosystem and to carbon sequestering. And our systems now, with the way that our ranchers are growing their herds on the grasslands, our root systems on our pasture lands are back to what they were when the buffalo roamed. Buffalo, millions of them on the prairies. And so we basically, I have a problem with the premise of the comment in regards to beef, because the truth of the matter is the amount of sequestering going on far outweighs any methane that they create or that type of thing as well. So choice is important. I have all kinds of different diets within my family. There was a time there when I couldn't cook a meal and please half of my family based on what their preferences are. And that's all fine. But I don't think we want to be in a circumstance where we miscommunicate that. So I'm going to get that and put it up on my Facebook, and you guys can watch it. It gives a really sound argument for the importance of animals and herds and that type of thing on our pasture lands. So, all right, I think I'll talk to the guy who's in charge here. We're done.
Okay.
I guess I've used our time.
Yeah,
Thank
Kathy,
you.
I just want to say one thing. I saw it came on the chat line, and not to belabor this town hall, but it did come up about mental health. And I would encourage everybody on the call to stay tuned and look at some of the policies that we'll be putting out. One of our key pillars that Aaron has put out is around mental health. And we have a colleague by the name of Todd Doherty, and he's done phenomenal work on this issue. And I would encourage you to look up Todd, look at some of his speeches, look at some of the things we've been doing in the House. It's great work. We recognize it's a huge problem. And this business of conservatives don't care, it's not true. It's absolutely not true. So I would encourage you to look at that.
All right. Again, thank you so much, James. I appreciate this. Just one of an amazing group of people, colleagues that I get to work with every day. And you guys, thank you to everyone who's on this call from Yorkton, Melville. I love our riding. I love the privilege of serving you, and look forward to the next opportunity we have to get together and chat about issues that are important to us in our riding and across the country. So thank you so much, everyone.
Great, thank you. It was a pleasure to be here.
Blessings on my veterans. Hi, Mike. Take care.